Captain, we have them. We've established Transporter Lock, the Star Trek podcast. Join Ken and Sabriel each week as they explore strange new episodes, seek out new plots and new characters, and boldly go where no podcast has gone before.
Hello and welcome to the Transporter Lock podcast. I'm your co-host, Chief Engineer Ken Gagney, and I'm joined by Commodore Mark. Hello, Mark.
Hello, Ken. Good to be here.
Always happy to have another Chatty Chatterson here with me.
Yes. It would be kind of lonely if it was just you talking.
There are podcasts that get by with just monologues, but I am not such a person or a personality that people want to listen drone on and on about Star Trek. And that's not why I'm here. I'm here to share Star Trek with my friends and family because Star Trek is all about infinite diversity and infinite combinations.
Very well spoken.
So we are here to discuss, or to continue discussing, the fifth and final season of Star Trek Lower Decks. The most recent episodes being The Best Exotic Nanite Hotel, which was last week, episode number 3, and this week's episode 4, A Farewell to Farms. Farewell to Farms.
Well played on both titles.
So I get the second one, A Farewell to Arms. What's the first one is The Best Exotic Nanite Hotel. What is that a reference to?
So I think that's a reference to The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel. That was a series. Or I'm sorry, that was a movie, The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel.
It was a 2011 movie with Judi Dench, Bill Nye, Maggie Smith. Okay. I have not heard of this movie. Apparently I need to go watch it so I can better appreciate the Star Trek I just saw.
I think that might the idea that it's a resort might be the end of the connection.
And of course, Farewell to Arms is the famous novel by Ernest Hemingway, which, just like I haven't seen the Marigold movie, I haven't read A Farewell to Arms, so I'm sure there were lots of highbrow literary references just being utterly lost on this uneducated American.
Well, I think if you'd seen Apocalypse Now, that is based on... No, sorry, Apocalypse Now is not based on that. It's based on Heart of Darkness. And that actually shows up in the Best Exotic Hotel episode.
Yes, I just found that out when I was doing my research for this episode. So Apocalypse Now is based on Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, as you mentioned, and it has a character named Milius, just like Admiral Milius in this episode. But I also haven't seen Apocalypse Now.
So there's all these inside references that are pervasive in our culture that neither one of us have watched.
See, I go into Lower Decks thinking that my extensive knowledge of Star Trek history and lore is going to be sufficient to get any and all inside jokes. And this week just proved how ignorant I really am.
Well, Star Trek has a history of bringing in other media, such as operas and Shakespeare, and referencing other novels as well.
Right, but like operas and Shakespeare, that's like classic culture, like classic literary references. And I guess the Heart of Darkness is as well, but I didn't expect them to be referencing like a 2011 movie or a 1980s epic war drama.
Yes.
So what do I know? So the Best Exotic Nanite Hotel, there are, as always, two stories going on here. The first, which the episode is named after, is there is a nanite swarm that is attacking a hotel. And of course, I immediately thought of the TNG episode with Wesley Crusher, where like some nanites become alive and they're trying to save them. And I thought those were these nanites, but they're not. They're not Borg nanites. They're just, nobody seems to wonder where these nanites came from. They just were here and we need to get rid of them.
Yes, they need to capture them humanely and eradicate them from the resort.
Indeed. And complicating that is the Andorian Jennifer.
Yes.
I completely forgot about her.
I think a lot of us had just kind of put her on the back burner, not thinking we'd come back and visit that relationship again. But Jennifer had other ideas for us.
Yeah, I'm glad Mariner was as confused as I was, because I was thinking, oh, have they been dating this whole time? And I just forgot because we haven't seen it. But Mariner's like, wait, what? We're still dating?
I thought we broke up. Oh, wait a minute. No, we never did break up.
I totally walked right past her. She should have known that meant I was breaking up with her. Like, so I gotta ask, Mark, have you ever had like a complicated breakup where the two parties were not on the same page about what had happened?
I can't say that. Well, I guess not exactly a relationship, but meeting up and thinking that we were going to go on a second date was that's a common occurrence in both directions. So,
Sure.
um, yeah, that, but never a relationship that went on for a while where at the end of it we weren't sure where we stood.
It's happened to me twice. Twice.
Oh, okay.
There was one time where I was hanging out with somebody and I thought we were friends and she thought we were dating, and this was not clear to either of us. And then finally on the fifth, what apparently was date, it was the first time that we'd hung out with other people instead of just one-on-one. We went to the movies with a bunch of my friends. And after we got out of the movie, she said, Ken, I thought you were treating me special because we were dating, but now that I've seen how you interact with your friends, I realize that you treat everybody special. And so you were just treating me like a friend. I was like, well, yeah, isn't that what you are? And I never saw her again.
That would be hard to come back from, I'm sure.
My bad. Certainly didn't mean to string anybody along. It was just a point in my life when communication was not my strong suit, apparently. Or hers.
Um, or hers, apparently. Yes, she should have been saying what she wanted all along as well.
Oh well.
It takes two. And actually, it turns out Jennifer wasn't really all that confused by the end of the episode.
Yeah, this made a lot more sense to me that she was just playing along because she was acting all snugly throughout the away mission. And even if there is confusion about whether or not you're dating somebody, that's not how you act on an away mission.
Are you kidding? That's how I act at work all the time. Then kidding.
I want to see where you work.
Okay.
Like there have been plenty of instances in Star Trek history of people going on away missions while dating. I mean, Book and Michael did it all the time on Discovery, but they
Yes.
were never like snuggling with each other and hugging and kissing and holding hands. Like they might stop to have some awkward, dramatic conversations at ill-timed opportunities, but they were never physical like Jennifer was being. So me realizing like, oh, she was purposely playing it up to get Mariner to say something made a lot more sense.
Yeah, that did explain itself by the end of the episode, but it made for a lot of awkward moments throughout their pursuit of the nanites.
Did you think that they were possibly going to get back together by the end?
It certainly seemed they were really warm with each other at the end, especially after the palm tree conversation. And I was almost like, wait a minute, is there something left here? Is there something that is now on the table? But I would like to think that the mature conversation that they had and the realization that Jennifer had that, oh, wait a minute, I finally have an ex that is not a mortal enemy, might suggest that they go for it as friends.
Yeah, I think that's sort of a step in the right direction or the best that they could hope for. Because if this is something
Yes.
Jennifer's never had, and it is hard to stay friends with an ex, if she's doing that for the first time here, then let's call that a win.
Oh, for sure.
Yep.
Absolutely. In fact, it seems like there were a lot of wins this episode for a development of character, also for uh, like seeing the people that we've been following for 5 seasons actually mature and grow beyond what they were. I think it was overall a good episode.
The nanites, I thought was really amusing when they took on the shape of a 20-sided die.
Yes, exactly. And icosahedron, I believe is the term. I've also heard it referred to as a dodecahedron, but that was kind of cool that a 20-sided die was the big boss at the end of at the end of the episode.
Yeah, it didn't really tie into much anything else. Like it's not like they were playing a Dungeons and Dragons game and all of a sudden the die came alive. It just sort of was out of nowhere. But as somebody who has played Dungeons and Dragons and who always looks at the dice at board game conventions and, drools over them, I really appreciated seeing one. Just the way it was rolling around and Also, sort of like Katamari Damacy. Have you ever played that video game?
I have not.
So
What is that like?
it's a game where you're just like this little ball of junk and you're rolling around and you're trying to, as you hit other things, you absorb them into the ball and the ball gets bigger and bigger. And your job is to make as big a ball as possible. So you start off by like you're rolling over like chairs and lamps and stuff. And then you're rolling over people and cows and cars. And the ball just gets bigger and bigger. And that's kind of what this thing was doing. It just, even if it like in one scene would go past something, it'd be like, oh, I forgot to absorb that. Go back, roll over it, and
Yeah,
everything's just getting
and get
pulled in.
and get Krog for to Lynn to meet later on.
Yes, I loved that aspect of these two characters. What did you think?
It was really kind of sweet how they admired each other for their strong, like their most public character traits. Krog admiring T'Lyn for her logic and Vulcan culture, and T'Lyn admiring Krog for his ability to play the vibe phones. The vibe phones? The vibe. Was that it? The vibe phones?
Let's find
Um,
out.
I believe that was I was trying to keep
Vibe
that on the tip of my
tubes.
tongue. Vibe tubes, thank you. Yes, and it's one of the more interesting ways that they've used music to get out of a situation. Um, and it's just incredible how they were like just dragging everything into that ball, and the ball kept everything right side up.
That's true. There is some sort of an internal gravity in there. I really liked seeing Talind's reaction when they were examining the theater and she saw the tubes. Like she just stopped mid-sentence
Yeah.
because we know that Vulcans have emotions, they just don't express them. And in that moment, she was expressing like the shock and awe of actually being this close to an artifact of one of her musical legends that she admires so much. You know, on Voyager, Seven of Nine was in some ways Vulcan-like, and she professed to the doctor that music has interesting mathematical properties. You know, she couldn't admit to actually liking music, but she liked the math behind it. And I'm
Has to
sure
be some logic.
right. And I'm sure there's something similar to Vulcans admiring music, but nonetheless, the fact that she like got to see it, got to play it, I'm sure that was a moment she'll never forget.
Oh, absolutely. Plus, now she has a signed photo of Frog to in case she has to go back and study handwriting.
That's right. Right. Just kind of keep it in her room just in case. So I thought that was very sweet. I mean, as somebody who myself has dozens of Star Trek autographed photos, I I appreciate the physicality of it, of just being able to like hang it on my wall. And I know that there are apps where you can take a photo of somebody and then have them sign it, but that just doesn't feel like the same to me. I want to hand them an 8 by 10 glossy with a marker, a Sharpie,
Right.
and say, please sign this. And even though that's not what they did in this episode, they were like, it still has the same sentiment. In the future, even without framed glossies, you can still have that admiration and appreciation for that fan artifact.
Yes. Um, and I'm sure that it'll bring back all the memories of the Duchess,
The Duchess,
the name of the cruise ship.
the cruise ship.
Yeah. So there the setting for the entire for the episode is a cruise ship named the Duchess.
I thought they were at a hotel.
Yeah. So the episode is named because of the exotic location. Um, but it's an actual vessel, a star-going vessel that is called the Duchess.
With palm trees?
With different environments, yes, and palm trees. So the like the whole volcano area, not volcano, mountain area, the Paramount. No, is it Paramount? No, that was the whole area where Milius is in one of the habitat structures. It looks like Starbase One is what I can't remember the name of the starbase, but it had the one that had the habitats branching out from all over the main structure.
Okay. I mean, that's true. She did mention that there was like a water park and an underwater dry park.
Yes.
I forgot that that was this. But a cruise ship? Oh yeah, I guess
Yeah,
you're right. I'm looking at the teaser now. The Cosmic Duchess, an interstellar cruise ship the size of a moon. Okay.
yes,
I mean, I guess I thought it was some sort of a star base. I didn't realize it was a cruise ship.
yes, much like the starbase in uh,
Star Trek Beyond.
not in Star Trek Beyond, but also the starbase in the latest season of Discovery. How it is also a starfaring vessel.
Oh, okay. I guess I forgot that too.
Yeah, so it pops up every once in a while. DS9 was supposed to have been a vessel capable of moving to other locations as well.
Like the actual D Space Nine station.
Yes,
And but it barely had engines. Like it was originally in circuit around Bajor, and it moved to be closer to the wormhole. And that was like the only time in the 7 seasons that it actually moved.
right. That was the only. You're right. The only time that it moved, but
Yeah.
it was capable of moving.
I think I remember like in one of the very first episodes, I think it was like Cisco saying, engage engines. And somebody was like, what engines? We're a space station.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, right. Sorry. Oh.
Yeah, but it was an interesting concept to have such a massive um, vessel that was also a resort location.
Yeah. I just, that part of it blew my mind. There
Yeah,
was,
and
as you mentioned, there were a lot of other habitats. There was the skiing area where Boimler went, and the beach area where he was chatting with those aliens from Star Trek Enterprise that find eating to be disgusting.
yes, they find everything to be disgusting in that episode. Lots of ways to offend them. But yeah, he ate and he drank in front of them, and then afterwards, he had to be like, "Well, I knew that. I don't know what I wasn't thinking."
Yeah, I love that they brought those aliens back because that was a big part of a particular episode of Enterprise, which would have been almost 25 years now.
Yes,
And when they started doing that, I was like, oh, that's the same creature. And it's weird to me that these aliens would still be offended by that when they're on a cruise ship where naturally people are going to be eating and drinking. Like you just have to expect that. You can't expect everybody on a cruise ship to not eat in public because that's something your people are offended by.
right. It would seem like you would try to avoid situations where that might come up if it were so offensive.
Right.
But apparently, the draw of a tropical beach paradise is too much.
I guess so. I think that alien race was the Cretaceans.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And it's kind of interesting that uh, he didn't get any information out of them because of that. And it really kind of reinforced for him this idea that he was expendable. And that's the only, and he was only brought in as a canary. Boimler was only brought in as a canary to be a test subject, so to speak, for different environments, which kind of followed through with the ski trip that he took to try to connect with the Admiral Milius cohort. Falling off, she skis past him and says, "I've never seen anybody fall off of a cliff and survive like that." Then he responds, well, it must be my low density bones from being a Starfleet officer, which I thought was an interesting explanation. Sure, you're lighter, but those low density bones should also be easier to snap.
More fragile, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand that Boimler was on edge because he thought he was being used as cannon fodder, but the way he fudged so many situations, like the Cretaceans, as we just mentioned, like he should have known about their culture. And also just blurting out, oh yeah, I'm in Starfleet when he also knows he's supposed to be undercover.
Right.
I don't know. I thought Boimler was better than that. And we've seen a really cool version of Boimler in the last few episodes. The person he's trying to become, especially in the next episode about Farewell to Farms. So to see him just repeatedly screwing up this episode was sort of a bump in the road to him becoming who he wants to be.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe it's all of the energy he's expending on growing that beard.
That's true. I mean, you and I know it's not easy.
It's not easy, yes.
Oh,
But he seems to redeem himself in the end. His wiriness and intelligence actually helps him break out the bros, so they can capture Milius and go home.
yes, a very creative use of sunscreen.
Yes, I would have never thought of it. It was a good misdirect. It made it seem like he was joining the party, and then what do you know? He slips through and gets everyone out.
Yeah, well, for a moment there, he did join the party. Like he was content to sit back and enjoy a drink instead of being used as cannon fodder. But it was only once Ransom said, "No, we wanted you because you're so resourceful and wiry." He's like, "Oh, I am valuable." So that's when he switched back to the side of Starfleet.
Yes.
Now, Admiral Milius, the way they like kept him literally in the dark and then brought him out onto the screen, it seemed like it's supposed to be a big reveal. Like we're supposed to know who this guy is, but he's never been in any Star Trek anywhere ever.
No, he hasn't. That was actually a reference to the
Apocalypse
movie.
Now.
Yes.
Ah, okay.
So it was. I've only ever seen a few clips from the movie, and that is one of them that I have seen, where Marlon Brando comes out of the shadows.
Oh, it's Marlon
To
Brando's.
yes, to
Okay.
reveal that he is at the center of whatever is happening in that movie.
Well, spoiler. Now I guess I don't need to go watch it.
Yeah, that spoils the entire movie.
Thanks.
I don't think it does.
Okay.
At least I don't. I wouldn't think it does because that was part of the clips that seem to be out there everywhere.
So the part of Admiral Milius was played by Toby Huss, who has not been on Star Trek before, but I know him from a lot of other things. He was on the AMC series *Halt and Catch Fire*, which is sort of like
Hmm.
a historical drama based on the early computer industry. He's in the Ben Stiller movie Nutcrackers, which is not out yet, but I saw it at the Toronto International Film Festival a few weeks ago.
Oh wow!
And most well, originally, what I knew him from was the Nickelodeon show The Adventures of Pete and Pete.
I've never seen that.
Oh, it was just like this fun, silly show they had where these two brothers with the same name go on these adventures. And there was this really wiry guy who pretended to be like a circus strongman, and he was Artie, the strongest man in the world. And that was a young Toby Huss who went on to do all this other cool stuff.
Who went on to grow a massive gut and get sunburned on a ship whose sun is artificial and is not supposed to be able to burn you.
Right, which is why Boimler didn't need the sunscreen in the first place,
Yeah.
supposedly.
Yes. Yeah. Which, if that's the case, then why did they even have sunscreen there in the first place? Sunscreen ex machina.
He always brings it with him no matter where he goes.
Best to be prepared.
Of course, the Admiral didn't get sunburned around his eyes for some reason.
Likely wearing sunglasses.
I
Is
guess
what
so.
I think was trying to be implied. But it is interesting that then when they do bring him back, he's been AWOL all this time because he hated milking space cows,
Whales.
both kinds of space cows. Oh, space whales. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hated milking both kinds of space whales. And yet they then give him an assignment,
It's all he's ever wanted.
a real assignment, right?
Yeah. And then they find
Um,
out that the nanites were actually a small, intrepid-sized Starfleet ship from another dimension.
yes. Captained by somebody in a TNG era uniform.
Oh, nice. I didn't pick up on that.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting that they didn't use the Voyager uniforms. They used the TNG uniforms. But even so, um, they are trapped in this universe, and they're building of this now to be known. It's not nanites because it's their scale. Their building of this device was to get enough energy that they could try to open another rift.
Right. To go back to their own little universe.
Yeah, and now Admiral Milius will be helping them out.
Yeah, I was hoping to see more about this intrepid ship, and I don't think we're going to see it. I thought they would be like flying around and doing stuff. And wasn't there an episode of Was it D Space Nine where the Defiant got shrunk and they were?
I seem to remember that there was an episode of something getting shrunk. And I don't think this is the last time we're going to see that that Intrepid class starship. I think it will be coming back.
I'm sure it will. And yes, D Space Nine in season 6, episode 14, One Little Ship.
One little ship. Good.
O'Brien, Dax, and Bashir are all miniaturized inside a runabout.
Okay. Yeah. That would I'll have to go back and watch that episode. It's been too long.
Yeah. Yeah, I assume we're going to see this little Intrepid again based on what we learn in the next episode, which, shall we talk about that? A Farewell to Farms?
Yeah, I think we can move on to a Farewell to Farms. Also, I was kind of surprised by the opening of that show or that episode.
You mean the lack of opening?
Yes, the lack of opening. The cold open that went right into the pastoral pan so that they could put the title logo up. It was an interesting choice, but I feel like it's been done in other series enough that when anybody who has been a captain for a while has to take a step back from it, they end up in some farm or in a vineyard in the case of Captain Picard. And this is kind of like a vineyard. They pull these worms out of the ground and stomp them into blood wine.
For the first time ever, we see how blood wine is actually made.
Yes, it's quite surprising.
But you're right. This was very reminiscent of the, I think, season 4 episode of Next Generation Brothers or Family, where he goes back to France and seeing that, yeah, when captains retire, whether it's from Klingon or Starfleet, they go to a vineyard, like you said. And Kronos has vineyards that are just as pastoral as anything we'd see in Earth's France, which is beautiful.
And gives credence to the axiom putting someone out to pasture.
Which is surprising because this guy is so young. I mean, he was an ensign who became a captain. He's the same age as Mariner, which Sabriel and I previously figured out, I think, is no more than early 30s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is very early for captainhood. But it was also that he was shamed for being the subject of a mutiny.
Yeah, I had forgotten about that. Like, I remember this character from that season finale that had, like, it introduced us to T'Lyn and it had some Ensign Borgs in one brief moment. And I forgot that he was also in the Nick Lorcano episode that culminated the previous season.
Right.
So yeah, I did do some research to brush up on that.
It's kind of interesting that even though we're only in I guess only the 5th season, this universe of Lower Decks has been built out enough that we can have an entire episode about a minor character. It's kind of fascinating.
Yeah, and the opening, as you were discussing, really cemented that he was the main character of this episode, and Mariner and Boimler were the supporting characters, which we don't often see them in those roles.
Right, and because of this setting on Kronos, there is no the rest of the crew from the ship don't get featured at all.
Yeah, which is fine. They deserve a week off.
Yeah, exactly.
So we have this whole thing about him trying to get his captaincy back, and he's going through these Klingon rituals that we've never heard of before. And I mean, some of them we've seen, like the pain sticks that used to be part of the birthday celebration. I think Worf went through that on the holodeck on TNG.
Yes, they're right, but those weren't set at maximum.
Right. Although I don't quite understand. I mean, I'm not an electrical engineer. I didn't take those classes. But if there are 4 people all touching each other, then the energy is distributed evenly across the 4 of them.
I'm sure it has something to do with impedance, but to be honest, I kind of slept through my electrical engineering courses back in my sophomore year of college.
Well, I did not even have the classes to sleep through. So you probably absorbed more than I did.
Perhaps. But it was clever that you couldn't do the trial with just 3 people. You had to do the trial with 4. And it appears that, yes, in the first trial of pain, 4 people are necessary to even survive.
Right. I mean, how would anybody else have ever gotten through it? They must have figured that out.
Yeah. And also for the council not knowing the trial, because it was clear that the antagonist hadn't heard of the trial before. It had to have some um, ensign bring up a pad to say, oh, this is what the trial is. And then for him to say, well, nobody's ever survived it before. And I'm like, okay.
That's a good point. I've never heard of it, but I know it's complete history.
Yes. I thought that was kind of interesting. But yeah, then the trial of strength, where they had to face that beast. And his brother is, of course, the expert at this because he's been on a farm for so long. Just grab one of its legs.
And it turns out to be the pet Targ. He's like, now clip his toenails and express his anal gland. And I was like, wait a minute. This is your Targ.
Yeah. She picks up on it right away. It's just like, wait, no, we're not going to do this for you.
Although his brother was very eager to express an anal gland.
Yes. It's like, I could do that.
Yeah, I once dog sat for somebody and they said, there's a slight chance you might need to do this. And I'm like, if that need arises, that need is going to be unmet.
Yeah, you'll have to wait 2 weeks.
Yeah, I did not sign up for this. Sorry. I'm going to take him for walks, feed him, water him. That's where my responsibility ends.
Yes. But they do make it through all 3 trials, although they end up killing the council member.
Yeah, I thought the rite of conscription was a very clever way to get around the need to sacrifice somebody.
Yes.
And ultimately, that council member was very dishonorable, the way he stabbed Mach in the back.
Absolutely. That was kind of shocking. And I'm kind of surprised like that the other 2 Klingons in the room wouldn't have turned against him immediately.
Right. Although Ma survived that attack and he in turn killed the councilman, we don't often see people die on screen in Lower Decks because this is a cartoon.
Yes, absolutely.
Mhm.
It was, I found it kind of shocking. It was also rather bloody. I mean, I guess it had to be. We were on Kronos and it was Klingons. So if it were to happen anywhere or to anyone, that would be the place in person.
I saw a Reddit thread a while back about what is the most violent death you've ever seen in Star Trek, and everybody nominated the same episode, Conspiracy from TNG, when they have those little worm parasites taking over people's brains, and at the end of the episode,
Oh,
they
yeah.
laser the guy, and he explodes.
Yes. That episode was banned for the longest time in the UK.
That's correct. Yes, because it was such a graphic death.
Yeah. And we're still talking about it 25 years later.
Right? More than that, because that was like the late 80s.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Quite a while ago.
but now we have this Klingon death in Lower Decks. I think that is going to be up there as well.
It was quite graphic. And I wasn't expecting to see that in animation.
Right.
I'm not necessarily mad at it. I just was very surprised.
Oh, I'm not upset in the slightest. I'm just like, oh, this seems out of character for Lower Decks. But if you go back to the opening sequence and you realize this is not a Starfleet episode, this is a Klingon episode, then this is par for the course for them. Sure.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
We did get to observe some aspects of Klingon culture here, like when they are riding their flying motorcycles through the city and they're cutting each other off.
Yes. And then they're cursing each other as they ride away.
Did you do any research into what that curse was?
No, I'm really bad when it comes to trying to figure out Klingon. I think it's because I'm pretty bad at learning languages in general.
So I turned on the closed captioning to hear what they were saying. They were saying, experience Bij. No, you experience Bij. And so Bij is the Klingon word for punishment.
Oh, okay.
But then our mutual friend Sabriel DM'd me this morning. She's like, hey, did you know where experience Bij came from? I was like, that didn't even occur to me. No, where is it? She said, remember like back in the 90s, the phenomenon of VCR board games?
Oh, it was one of those.
Yeah, it was Star Trek: The Next Generation, The Klingon Encounter, I believe was the name of it. And the actor who would later go on to be cast as Galron
Hmm.
was in this episode where he had like hijacked the Enterprise and was stealing it back to Kronos. And he used that phrase multiple times. May you experience Bij,
That is a deep cut that
right?
most fans would miss.
But Lower Decks, that's what they do. They take this stuff that isn't canon, whether it's the animated series or whether it's a VCR board game, and they're like, boom, it's canon now because we referenced it.
Right. Yeah. Suddenly these, yep, like you said, little things that were beta, or what was the word you were using? Um,
Non-canon?
yeah, but there was beta canon and something else. But where it's actually just not canon at all. Um, it's kind of interesting to yeah, to see all these things being brought in.
Yeah, what you and I were talking about in the last episode was there's memory alpha, which is the stuff that is canon. There's memory beta, which is the stuff that's in the books and the comic books and the video games, which isn't canon. And then there's memory gamma, which is just like people's head canon,
Gotcha. Right.
just people making stuff up. So Experience Bij is like beta canon because it was in an actual official Star Trek product. It just wasn't part of the universe. But I saw a Reddit thread this morning that somebody was saying like, "Oh my God, I've experienced Bij burned into my memory from growing up playing that game. I never thought I would hear it in a Star Trek show."
Oh,
Uh,
that's so great for fans like that are able to um, see something that was part of their childhood get put into official canon.
right.
I'm sure it's amazing.
I imagine they were having that same moment that Leonardo DiCaprio did in that GIF where he's just like pointing at the screen. It's like, I got that reference. There
So
was a
funny.
there was also a B plot regarding our fine feathered psychiatrist.
Miglan Moon, yes, and his culture, whose entire reason for going out into the stars was to experience other cuisines.
Right. To seek out and explore strange new meals.
Yes, it was such a silly plot, but yet I think they put it together really well, where it actually worked out, and kind of threading his psychology into being the chef of the mind was just kind of interesting. That came back at the end where he finally realizes that these two food critics hated everything that they were eating because their anxieties about being food critics caused them to lose their taste.
Yeah, it's really interesting when we have an alien interacting with its own culture. Like in the previous episode, we had Jennifer who wanted to transfer to a different Starfleet ship that had a lot of Andorians on it. Like she wanted to be among her own people, even though Starfleet itself is a melting pot. And here we see Dr. Miglamu try to, in a way, like reintegrate himself into his culture and fail miserably for reasons that turned out were not his own. It wasn't
Right.
his fault, but he desperately wanted to be accepted by his own people. And, we've joked before about how the Klingons, they must have an engineer cast and a lawyer cast, but we only ever see the warriors. And with Dr. Miglamu, his people are all about the food. And here he is, as you said, being a chef of the mind. And like that right there makes him an outcast, but he doesn't want to be. He wants to be himself and just be accepted and respected by his people.
Right. And he tries to make that happen through food.
Mhm.
Even it conscripts the crew to help him out as well.
I loved the very, very brief moment where Tendi is chopping up everything with knives, and she's like, assassin training.
Yeah.
Because there was a movie back in 1996 called The Long Kiss Goodnight. It had Gina Davis and Samuel L. Jackson. And I'm going to spoil like the first 20, 30 minutes of it, where
I've seen it before, but I don't remember it.
I saw
But you
it.
can spoil it.
I saw it in theaters when it came out in 96. That's the only time I saw it. I remember I was working at Blockbuster Video and I would go to the movies like every Friday after my shift. So the movie starts with her being uh amnesiac and pregnant. and she has no idea what her life was like. But like she meets a guy, they get married, they settle down, and she starts this whole new life. But even though her past is just a complete blank slate. And then one day she's in the kitchen and she starts chopping up the food and she's really good at it. And she's like, oh my gosh, I must have been a chef. And that's what I was in a past life. That's the thing I forgot. I was a chef. And she's like doing stuff with knives. And then all of a sudden, like she grabs a knife like by the blade and she throws it and it pins it like right into the wall opposite and like almost hits her husband like near the ear. And she's like, chefs do that, right? Like, no, the reason you're good with knives is because you're an assassin. And that's what the movie was about.
Wow. So do you think Tendy's line was an intentional reference?
I don't think it was intentional because that movie is 28 years old now, and probably not a lot of people saw it. It's not like it's a cultural phenomenon like Apocalypse Now. But it's just something that reminded me, like the idea that somebody who is good with knives because they're an assassin would be good with knives in a different context. It kind of makes sense, and it's funny.
Oh yeah, for
Uh,
sure. I did enjoy that moment as well. Um, and it just kind of reinforced that people, Starfleet officers and people on starships seem to have an inordinate amount of time to go and do these side projects, which is just kind of out there.
well, think about it. Like, if you're working 9 to 5 on a Starfleet vessel, and when you're done, you don't have to go to a second job because all your material needs are taken care of. You have no need for money. You don't ever have to cook because everything's just in the replicator. You don't have to clean because the environment is probably self-cleaning. That gives you a lot of time to go play Parisi Squares or whatever.
Yeah, I suppose you're right. That it's not like being in a modern space station where you only have time to exercise so that your muscles don't atrophy, sleep, and work because otherwise your environment falls apart.
Right. And the commute to jobs when you're on a Starfleet vessel, I mean, like you take the turbo lift up and you're there.
Yeah. Take the turbo lift any direction, up, down, sideways.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
They were showing that to us in Discovery that turbo lifts go more than one direction.
Discovery and Strange New World. So we saw a lot of that, and I think it's kind of silly, which is why it's very different from what we saw in TNG. Like I think the episode is called Disaster or something like that, where Picard is trapped in a turbo lift with a bunch of little kids.
Mm-hmm.
No, and when they climb out, it looks like an elevator shaft, not
Right.
like on Strange New World. You would think that most of the ship is empty space that these turbo lifts are just
Yes.
flying around in. Like that is so inefficient design.
And if you look at the diagrams for the original Enterprise, there are a couple of spots where it looks like the turbo lift shafts go in a horizontal direction, but there's no such thing as like just free spinning wherever you want it to go.
Right. I could totally see them going about on like 3 axes, like XYZ, any one at any given time. But yeah, they were just like, it looked more like an amusement park ride when we saw it on Strange New Worlds and Discovery.
Yes, it did.
Just bizarre.
Um, which I mean, any technology sufficiently advanced will look like magic.
But there's still good interior design and like economy of space. That's not magic. That's just architecture.
Yes. Um, yeah. Turbo lifts, at least in lower decks, seem to follow the TNG rules. So
Yes. Now, I did really appreciate at the end of that B plot that they literally replicated excrement.
yeah.
I, I don't know how they snuck it into that dish, but
There were two of them. The guards were holding one dish, and the crew of the Cerritos were holding the other dish.
oh,
So
I
at
didn't
some
notice
point
that.
in time, the Cerritos crew had the dish in their hands. I was like, how did the Cerritos crew get the food? And they were the ones handing the food off. And I think what was happening was that they were handing the food before the guards could hand the food.
Got it. I missed that. That's some clever sleight of hand.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that was kind of interesting that the person greeting them or the Klowahkan greeting them was like, that is excrement.
Yep. Now
um,
I did have to call into question though some of the other foods that were being prepared because the two critics clearly balked at the idea of eating replicated food. So the next dish they try serving them is not replicated, but it looks like some sort of a seafood or a fish dish because it has lots of eyes and whatever. But they suggested very strongly in the next generation that by the 24th century everybody's vegetarian. Like we no longer need to enslave animals for our food.
right.
So what are they doing? Like killing this fish and serving it as a dish.
But the Federation is not monoculture. So um, even once the Klingons join the Federation, they still have live food on their table.
Klingons never joined the Federation.
Oh,
I'm sorry, the individual Klingons did, not the Klingon
yes,
race.
right. And so they would replicate food that would look like it was moving and living.
So, like, are you talking about Worf, for example?
Yeah. But I
Did
mean,
we?
I think in the movies, they've been at tables where they would like respect the culture enough to actually consume the food. But I think what I'm getting away from the point. I don't think that the entire Federation is vegetarian.
Is Earth?
Um, well, so in Enterprise, Earth is not because I know that the Vulcan officer on Enterprise was in the Enterprise series commented on that in a few points.
But Enterprise predates the Federation.
Predates the Federation. So yeah, I don't know. Do you have to be vegetarian to join the Federation?
I don't know. I mean, there were certainly episodes of TNG where we saw them eating eggs or carving up a roast or something, and they never explicitly said this is authentic. So it was safe for our headcanon to be, oh, that's replicated meat, which is fine. We even have that nowadays on Earth. But yeah, it was very
Hmm.
strongly implied in this episode that that dish was not replicated. So
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, maybe the Cloakans have an exception for that because they're such foodies.
But also, a lot of early TNG was just Gene Roddenberry making crap up as he went.
Yes, that's true.
So maybe I shouldn't get so hung up on it.
And yeah, that's an interesting question. Though I'll have to follow up on that one to see if to join the Federation you must have not be enslaving lower animals anymore for food.
Well, I
Yeah,
don't know. We'll find out.
yeah, we'll find out.
Is there anything about either of these episodes we haven't discussed yet?
I was just trying to think of that. It seems like we got the B plot of this one, and we definitely covered the primary plot. It was kind of interesting that the entire time Beckett wasn't trying. I mean, I'm sure that Beckett was supporting Mach as a friend and as a colleague, but it was. I found it interesting that this entire time she was like on this side mission or the primary mission to be able to scan the fissures or the fissure in Klingon space. And in order to get there, she had to topple this council. It's just like, oh well, I didn't intend for him to be killed, but it was kind of interesting. And then they were able to scan it and go, oh well, it's man-made or
That's
not
right.
man-made. It's artificial.
I almost forgot to bring up that very important point that this is the thread that's tying everything together this season. Last season, it was ensigns being kidnapped, and this season, it's Fishers. So we had the one where they went into the parallel dimension that was very similar to theirs. They had the
Yep.
mini Intrepid show up in the nanites. We have this one in Klingon space, which we don't know what it does, if anything. But yeah, there is something or somebody creating these. Do you have any theories as to who or why?
That is a really good question. I am kind of puzzled on that one. I'm hoping that it's hoping it's an exciting reveal, like maybe somebody from beyond the barrier at the edge of the galaxy.
One Reddit thread said that since this is the fifth and final season, they know it is, maybe they want to tie up loose ends. And Boimler still has that transporter clone who was declared dead, but actually joined Section 31.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe they want to find out what happened with him. I don't know.
Or maybe they have to bring him in order to resolve this at some point. It'd be kind of interesting.
I would not be surprised if we see him at some point.
Yeah, that would be kind of nice to tie up that end. I think it's also interesting to note that Boimler's beard is getting much fuller this episode. It actually has a mustache.
It's been progressive every episode, and I appreciate that they are committing to the bit.
Yes. And he also seemed to have some weird kind of bravado about him, like experiencing everything Klingon, even to the point where they're like, and the pain sticks are going to be used, and he's like, "Oh, that's going to hurt so much. That's so exciting, Klingon."
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Yeah, it was nice to see him being a hero this episode.
Yes, and using his intelligence and science to be able to get through things.
And also how he and Mariner seem to independently come up with the same lie about like, oh yeah, if you don't repay a favor, you get eaten by a bear.
Yes, and she's like elbowing him, and he's like, "Oh right, bear."
I would prefer to think that that's not something they coordinated in advance. They just both came up with the same lie.
Or maybe he wasn't as distracted as we thought he was, and he actually heard her say it.
I still prefer that they just came up with the same lie.
The same lie. Okay.
That's what I find amusing.
I like that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know, is that going to be a Chekhov's gun for some future episode?
Maybe. I'm going to say that so far, I think A Farewell to Farms was probably my favorite episode of the season so far, and The Best Exotic Nanite Hotel was probably my least favorite episode.
I think I would agree with that assessment. The least exotic, or the most exotic, best. No, I can't. The whole thing on the Duchess was, it was just really silly, and I did think that even if Boimler were that distracted by the idea that he was going to lose his hands, he wouldn't have made that many mistakes. It just didn't seem in character for him.
Yeah. And something I think I've mentioned before is that I wish the A and the B plots of these various episodes tied in better. Like on The Best Exotic Nanite Hotel, okay, they were both on the Duchess. One was trying to solve the nanite problem, the other was trying to find this admiral. Okay. But The Farewell to Farms, like the cut between like Boimler being hit by a pain stick and Dr. Miglimu cooking a dish on the Cerritos, like there was no correlation there. And I found it somewhat abrupt sometimes that they would go from one to the other. And so I don't mind the stories. The stories are fun. I just wish that they were less disconnected from each other.
Right. And that, so in another thing to the episode 3 is that the two storylines did tie in at the end because of Milius now going to help out the miniature Intrepid class ship. Whereas in episode 4, there was never a tie-in at the end between the two. They were distinct. They were distinct stories that we went back and forth on, so that you wouldn't get, I guess, bored with one of the stories.
With only 22 minutes per episode, there's not a lot of time to get bored anyway.
Yeah, that's true. I do like A and B plot storylines, but you're absolutely right. I think it would have been a little bit better if they were more related to each other.
Yeah. Well, we still have 6 more episodes to go this season. We're only 40% of done this season, so we have plenty of opportunities.
Don't remind me that there's only 6 more.
I'm sorry. Well, when Prodigy season 2 dumped or got released, everything was available all at once, and it was very easy to binge it. And before you know it, the whole season was over. At least with Lower Deck season 5, we have another 6 weeks to go.
That's true.
Like
That's
six episodes of Lower Decks, if they were all available, I could watch them all tonight, and that's only like less than 3 hours of content. But
Yes.
I'd rather it be 6 weeks than 3 hours.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I agree. And plus, it gives us more to talk about.
Yeah, the last episode airs December 19th, the week before Christmas. So we will be on the air on Transporter Lock every other week, talking about 2 episodes of Lower Decks, as we have been. I hope everybody stays tuned, and until then,
Eat your vegetables.
If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on iTunes and keep your hailing frequencies open by following us on Twitter @TransporterLock or subscribing to our podcast and email newsletter at transporterlock.com.